Hello students. So today we'll start with the next topic, that is proportion. So in the previous classes we have studied the first part, that is ratio. Now we'll study the proportion. So this is also a very important topic from the point of your examination. So on this also you will get 1 or 2 questions in the exam. So let's begin with the topic, it is proportion. So first you have to understand what is exactly meant by this proportion. So very simple it is. Proportion means what? When two ratios are equals to one another, then those two ratios are said to be in a proportion. Yeah, when two ratios are equals to one another, then those two ratios are said to be in a proportion. And the four quantities forming the proportion are called as what it is? Proportionals. So to clear the meaning, you can have an example. Suppose if there are two ratios, A is to B, and second ratio, suppose it is C is to D. And if these two ratios are equals to one another, to indicate equal, so we are using this symbol. Here I have put 4 dots, right? So this, how you have to read? It is as. How to read? As. Or it indicates what it is? Equal. So I am writing A is to B. First ratio is equal to the second ratio. So if these two ratios are equals to one another, then only we can write as A is to B, as C is to D, otherwise no. Yeah. So proportion means what? When two ratios are equals to one another, then those two ratios are said to be in a proportion. And the four quantities forming the proportion, that is A, B, C and D, are called as what it is? Proportionals. Yeah. So I hope it is clear what is exactly meant by this proportion. So in proportion, right, last two terms A and D, they are called as what it is? Extremes. Last two terms are called as extremes, and middle two terms are called as what it is? Means. Last two terms are called as extremes, and middle two terms are called as what it is? Means. And in proportion, the product of extremes is always equal to the product of means. So this is the fundamental rule of what it is? Proportion. So if you multiply extremes on one side and means on another side, the multiplication of both terms comes to what is same. That is A into D, you have to multiply on one side. That must be equal to what it is? B into C. So if you multiply these two terms on one side and these two terms on second side, the multiplication of these two terms comes to the same. Just to make it more clear, you can have an example. Suppose if the ratio is, or if suppose if the proportion is, it is 2 is to 3, as it is 6 is to, say it is 9. 2 is to 3 is nothing but what it is? 6 is to 9. So both ratios are what it is? Equal to one another. Then only we can say these two ratios are in proportion, equal. So as I said, last two terms are called as what it is? Extremes. 2 and 9 are called as extremes, and 3 and 6 are called as what it is? Means. So if you multiply these terms, right, means if you multiply these extremes on one side, that is 2 into 9, that must be equal to what it is? Means. Means are what it is? 3 into 6. So if you multiply 2 into 9, you will get it is 18. This is equal to 3 into 6 also, you will get what it is? 18. Is from this one what we understand, that product of extremes is always equal to the product of means. So this is the fundamental rule of what it is? Proportion. Means out of these four terms, right, if you know any three terms, we can easily determine the fourth term. So to determine the fourth term, we make use of this rule, right? In proportion, the product of extremes is equal to the product of means. Okay. So this is what about the basic about it is proportion. But to put the proportion, directly we cannot put the proportion. So to put the proportion, so first always you have to see whether each relationship or whether each ratio involves direct or inverse proportion. So far as proportion is concerned, there are three types of proportions. There are how many? There are three types of proportions. That is types of proportions. So first one is direct proportion. Number 2, inverse proportion. And third one is compound proportion. Like that, there are how many types? There are 3 types of proportion. So this is very important. So if you understand this, so you can very easily solve the problem on what it is proportion. So first we have to understand what is exactly meant by direct and inverse. So one by one we'll see. So first one is what it is, direct proportion. So direct proportion means what? Very simple it is. When an increase or decrease, when an increase or decrease in one variable is accompanied, is followed by increase or decrease in another variable, then those two variables are said to be in a direct proportion. Yeah? When an increase or decrease in one variable is accompanied, is followed by increase or decrease in another variable, then those two variables are said to be in a direct proportion. Right? So just to clear the meaning of this direct proportion, you can have an example. Suppose one article cost you, suppose it is 5 rupees. One article cost you 5 rupees. Then 10 articles of the same type will cost you how much? Definitely it will cost you rupees 50 only. Or if 10 articles cost you 50 rupees, then 6 articles will cost you how much? Definitely less than this, right? Means it is how much? 30 rupees. Means if you observe this clearly, right? If you observe this carefully, so what you can see, as the number of articles bought increases, the cost also increases, and as the number of articles bought decreases, the cost also decreases. Means what we can say here, the number of articles varies directly with the cost. Means as my number of articles increases, my cost also increases, and as the number of articles bought decreases, my cost also decreases. Means when both are increasing, right, or when both are decreasing, both have to increase or both have to decrease, right, then we say that it is in direct proportion. So how to put the proportion, that is also very important. Now suppose we know here what one article cost me 5 rupees, means how to realize whether that ratio was direct or inverse. Just to check that, now I have given the example here, one article cost me 5 rupees. So my question is, 10 article cost 50 rupees. Suppose we don't know what is the cost of it is 10 articles, that we have to find. Suppose what is the cost of it is 10 articles I want to calculate. So first what you have to do, from the given problem, suppose the problem is one article costs 5 rupees and question is what will be the cost of 10 articles. I want to calculate the cost of 10 articles. So how to calculate? So for that what you have to do, you have to put the equation. So how equation you have to put? For it is one article. For one article, right, cost rupees how much? 5. If one article costs 5 rupees, so what I want to calculate? I want to calculate what is the cost of it is how many articles? 10 articles. Now what is the cost of 10 articles? It is not known. So let's assume the cost of 10 articles be rupees, it is X. Right? I'll assume the cost of 10 articles as rupees how much it is? X. And now after putting the equation, now first what you have to do? First we have to put the proportion. So always remember, to put the proportion, we require how many ratios here? We require 2 ratios. And here we are having 2 ratios. This is the ratio of articles and this is the ratio of what it is cost. So just by seeing the problem, you cannot put the proportion directly. Before putting the proportion, first always you have to see whether each ratio involves direct proportion or inverse proportion. So how to put the proportion? Clear? So first always what you do, first like this you have to put the equation and then you see whether the number of articles varying directly or inversely with the cost. So for that you will have to compare this number of articles with the cost. So how you have to compare? We know what? One article cost me how many rupees? 5 rupees. So if one article cost me 5 rupees, then 10 articles will cost you how much? Right? More or less? Right? What will be the cost of 10 articles? More than 5 rupees or less than 5 rupees? So definitely the cost of 10 articles will be more than 5 rupees only. Because one article cost me 5 rupees, so definitely the cost of 10 articles will be more than 5 rupees only. Means here what is happening here? Here my cost is increasing. Here my number of articles already have increased from 1 to 10. So as my number of articles increases, the cost also increases. Yeah. So here, what is happening here? Both are increasing. Number of articles have increased, and due to increase in articles, my cost is also increasing. So when both are increasing or when both are decreasing, so it is called as which proportion? Direct proportion. And when the proportion is direct, so how to put the proportion? Now we know number of articles in direct proportion. Now we have to write the ratio of articles and the ratio of the cost. So when the proportion is direct, so ratio of articles is always written as it is 1 is to 10. How you have to write the ratio of number of articles? 1 article is to 10 articles. So it is 1 is to it is 10 as means what it is equal to what? It is last ratio. Last ratio is what? Last ratio is the ratio of it is cost. So it is always written in direct proportion only, right? So it is always written as 5 is to x. So it is written as 5 is to x. So this is called as my proportion, right? So here to put the proportion, as I said, we require how many ratios? 2 ratios, or we require how many terms? 4 terms. So and out of these 4 terms, if we know any 3 terms, we can easily determine the 4th term by using the rule of what it is proportion. What the rule of proportion says? In proportion, the product of extremes is equal to the product of means. So as I said, in proportion, last 2 terms are called as what it is? Extremes, and middle 2 terms are called as what it is? Means. So let's apply that rule. So extremes must be equals to what it is? Means. So multiply extremes on one side and means on another side. So 1 into x, 1 into it is x equals to my means are, it is 10 into 5. So what I want here, I want x value, bring x outside. So this x equals to this 10 into 5 is divided by 1. So it comes to how much? It is 50 rupees, right? Means the cost of 10 articles will be rupees how much here? 50 rupees. So if one article cost me 5 rupees, so definitely 10 article cost me rupees how much it is? 50 rupees. Like this. Or suppose we know what it is, 10 articles cost, right? 10 articles cost me, suppose it is 50 rupees. So what I want to know, what will be the cost of these 6 articles? What will be the cost of these 6 articles? Suppose the cost of 6 articles is not known. Clear? So let's assume the cost of 6 articles we say is rupees x. And again, as it is, you have to put the equation. So how equation you have, like this you have to put the equation. 10 article cost 50 rupees, then what will be the cost of 6 articles? So I don't know what is the cost of 6 articles, so I am assuming it as what it is, x. And before putting the proportion like this, right? So first what you have to do, first you have to check whether the number of articles are in direct or inverse. So for that you have to compare these articles with the cost. So compare. So 10 articles cost me how much? It is 50 rupees. So if 10 articles cost me 50 rupees, then 6 article will cost me how much? More or less, right? More than 50 rupees or less than 50 rupees. So if 10 article cost me 50 rupees, so definitely the cost of 6 articles will be less than 50 rupees only, right? Means here my cost is decreasing. Why? Due to decrease in articles. So as my number of articles bought decreases, my cost also decreases. So here both are decreasing. Articles have decreased, due to that cost is also decreasing. Here what has happened? Here the number of articles have increased. Due to increase in articles, my cost is also increasing. So here both were increasing. So when both are increasing or when both are decreasing, it is said to be which proportion? Direct proportion. So and when the proportion is direct, how you have to put the proportion? So number of articles is written as it is. Ratio of articles is written as it is. 10 is to 6 when it is direct. So it is 10 is to it is 6 as equal to the last ratio. Last ratio is always written in direct form only. It is written as 50 is to x. And now what you have to do? But to find the value of x, you have to apply the rule of proportion. What the rule of proportion says? In proportion, the product of extremes is always equal to the product of means. So multiply extremes on one side and means on another side. So my extremes are 10 and x. So it is 10 into x is equal to my means r is 6 into what it is 50. Yeah. Now I want x value, bring x outside, keep this x here only. This is equals to this 6 into 50, transfer 10 equal to that side. So this multiplication becomes here what it is? Division. And divide this. So x is equal to, if we divide this, so 6 into 5 you get how much? It is 30 rupees. Like this. So 6 article cost me how much? It is 30 rupees. Clear? So this you have to understand. how to realize whether that ratio involves direct or inverse. Clear? So I hope it is clear how to realize a direct proportion. So direct proportion means what? When an increase or decrease in one variable is accompanied, is followed by increase or decrease in another variable, then those two variables are said to be in a direct proportion. Understood? So this is what about what it is, direct proportion. Now second one is what it is, inverse proportion. So inverse proportion is the opposite of what it is, direct proportion. So inverse proportion means what? When an increase or decrease in one variable is accompanied, is followed by decrease or increase in another variable, then those two variables are said to be in a inverse proportion. Or in other words, when one increases, other decreases. When one increases, other decreases, or when one decreases, other increases, then it is called as what it is, inverse proportion. Yeah. So to clear the meaning, again you can have the example, right? Suppose there is a person A, right? Suppose there is a person, it is A, and suppose they have given the capacity of doing the work. Suppose if he works 6 hours daily, suppose there is one work to be done, and to do that work, if he is working 6 hours daily, so he can complete that work in, suppose it is in 5 days. Suppose he can complete that work in how many days? 5 days. Or instead of working for, it is 6 hours, suppose if he works for, it is 10 hours. If he works for what it is, 10 hours, right? So how many days are required? 3 days are required to complete that work. Yeah. Or suppose if he works 3 hours daily, so to complete the same piece of work, it takes him how many days? 10 days. Right? This is the example. Just to know how to realize whether it is inverse or direct. So if we observe here, as the number of hours to do the work increases, my number of days required to do the work decreases. And as the number of hours to do the work decreases, my number of days required to complete the work increases. Means when one increases, other decreases, or when one decreases, other increases. So when one is increasing, another one is decreasing, or when one is decreasing, another one is increasing, then it is said to be what it is, inverse proportion. Right? So again, to make the meaning clear, right? Let's solve like this. Means you will understand better. Means when the proportion is direct, how to put the proportion, and when the proportion is inverse, how to put the proportion. Yeah. So make it more clear. So suppose we know if he works 6 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? 5 days are required. And suppose we have to ask, they have asked to calculate if he works 10 hours daily, to complete the same piece of work, how many days are required. Suppose this is the problem. So to solve this, right, what I have to do, first you have to put the equation. So how equation you have to put here? Suppose for how many hours? If you work 6 hours daily, to complete that work, we know how many days are required? 5 days are required. And suppose they have asked you to calculate, if he works 10 hours daily, how many days are required? So how many days are required to complete the work? It is not known. So let's assume it is how many days be required? X days be required to complete that work if he is working how many hours? 10 hours daily. Right? Now after putting the equation, now first you have to check whether the number of hours are in direct proportion or inverse proportion. Yeah. So let's compare number of hours with what it is number of days. So we know what, if you work 6 hours daily, to complete that work it takes how many days? 5 days are required. Now instead of working 6 hours daily, now if he works 10 hours daily, right, now he is working for more hours. So if he works for more hours, definitely to complete that work less days are required. It won't take more than 5 days or 5 days, definitely it will take less than 5 days. Means as the number of hours to do the work increases, number of days required to complete the work decreases. So definitely if he works for more hours, naturally to complete the work less days are required. So if you observe here carefully, so what you can see here number of hours have increased from 6 hours to 10 hours, and due to increase in hours my number of days required are decreasing. So one is increasing, another one is decreasing. So when one is increasing, another one is decreasing, so it is said to be which proportion? Inverse proportion. It is said to be which proportion? Inverse proportion. And when the proportion is inverse, so how you have to write the ratio, or how you have to put the proportion? So when it is inverse, we have to write the ratio opposite. So instead of writing 6:10, we have to write 10:6 when it is inverse, opposite. So it is ratio of hours, it is in inverse, so it is written as it is 10:6, opposite. So here it was direct. As it was direct, so we have written the ratio as it is 1:10, or as it is 10:6 we have written here, right? 10:6 because it was direct. If it would have been inverse, so I would have written opposite as 6:10, like that. So here also, here the ratio is in inverse. So how we have to write here? 10:6 as, and this ratio whatever they ask, it is always written in direct proportion only. So it is written as 5:X. Now this is called as the proportion, right? And to find this fourth term, we have to use the rule of proportion. What the rule of proportion says? In proportion, the product of extremes is equal to the product of means. So multiply extremes on one side and means on another side. So my extremes are, it is 10 into x is equal to means are, it is 6 into what it is 5. Or I want x value, bring this x outside. So x is equal to, it is 6 into 5. This remains as it is. And transfer 10 to this side, this multiplication becomes it is division. So it is 5 1s, that is 5 2s are, 2 1s, that is 2 3s are. So x is equal to, it how many days? 3 days. Yeah, like this. Means if he works 10 hours daily, to complete that work, it takes how many days? 3 days. Or suppose we know to do a piece of work, if he is working 10 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? 3 days are required. Right? If you are working 10 hours daily, to complete that work, 3 days are required. So suppose you have to find, instead of working 10 hours, if you work 3 hours daily, so how many days are required? So like this, again you have to put the equation. So how equation you have to put? So for how many? It is for 10 hours. For 10 hours, if he is working 10 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? 3 days are required. So what I want? For, suppose if he works 3 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? This is the equation. So again, how many days are required? It is not known. So let's assume it is x days be required. And now as it is, you have to see whether the number of hours are in direct proportion or in inverse proportion. Yeah. So let's check whether it is in inverse or direct. So first you compare hours with the number of days. So if he works for 10 hours daily, to complete that work, we know how many days are required? 3 days are required. Now instead of working 10 hours daily, if he works 3 hours daily, right? So how many days it will take to complete that work? More or less? Means more than 3 days are required or less than 3 days are required, that you have to see. Right? So if you work for less hours, definitely to complete the work, more days are required. So your number of days required to do the work will be, definitely it will be more than 3 days. Alright. So as the number of hours decreases, number of days required to do the work increases. So what is happening here? Here number of hours are decreasing, and due to that number of days required are increasing. So one is decreasing, another one is increasing. Here it was, one was increasing, another was decreasing. So here one is decreasing, another one is increasing. So when one is increasing, another one is decreasing, or when one is decreasing, another one is increasing, then it is said to be what it is? Inverse proportion. And when the proportion is inverse, so how to put the proportion or how to write the ratio? So ratio of hours is written opposite. Instead of writing 10:3, we have to write 3:10. So how we have to write the proportion here? So here I will write a ratio is written as 3:10. Opposite 3:10. As means it is equal to, right? It is equal to what it is. Last ratio is always written in direct form only. It is written as 3:10. Okay, so this is called as the proportion. And to find this fourth term, we have to use the rule of what it is proportion. What the rule of proportion says? In proportion, the product of extremes is equal to the product of means. So multiply extremes on one side and means on another side. So extremes are it is 3 into this x is equal to means are it is 10 into this 3, or I want x value, bring x outside. So x is equal to this 10 into 3 is divided by what it is 3, or x is equal to 3 get cancelled. So it comes to how many days? It is 10 days, like this. So if you work 3 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? 10 days are required. So this is how you have to realize whether that ratio involves direct or inverse. So you have to be perfect in the direct and inverse. So if you make slight mistake here, right, if it is in direct and if you write in inverse, so the whole sum will go wrong and you will not get any marks. So for that you have to be perfect, right, to realize whether that relationship involves direct or inverse. So this is what about it is direct proportion and inverse proportion, which you have to understand. And the last one is what it is compound proportion. So maximum sums you will get on what it is compound proportion. So compound proportion means what, right? So when there are more than two ratios, if there are more than two ratios, then the proportion is said to be what it is compound proportion. So in these two examples we have seen there is to be only two ratios, number of articles and the cost, or number of hours and the number of days. But sometimes there will be more than two ratios. Sometimes the problem involves 3 ratios, 4 ratios, 5 ratios, 8 ratios. So when the problem involves more than 2 ratios, then the question arises how to put the proportion, right? How to put the proportion. So that comes under what it is compound proportion. So compound proportion means what? When there are more than 2 ratios, right? If there are more than 2 ratios, then the proportion is said to be what it is compound proportion. So just to explain this, we can have an example, right? Suppose there are 3 ratios, right? Suppose first one is it is 2:3. This is first ratio. Second ratio is suppose it is 4:6. One more ratio, suppose it is 5:, suppose it is 3. Like these 3 ratios are there. Clear? Now the question is how to put the proportion. Can you put the proportion? It is not possible, because to put the proportion we require only how many ratios? 2 ratios. We require only 2 ratios. So sometimes, right, there will be more than 2 ratios. The question is how to put the proportion. So at that time what you have to do? Whatever may be the number of ratios. Like here I have taken only 3 ratios. So there may be 5 ratios, 6 ratios, 8 ratios. Let it be whatever may be the number of ratios. So whatever number of ratios are there, right? So those number of ratios we'll have to convert into one single ratio. That ratio is called as what it is compounded ratio. So how to convert the number of ratios into one single ratio? So to convert that, so while explaining about the ratio, I told every ratio has how many terms? 2 terms. Every ratio has how many terms? 2 terms. First term is called as what it is antecedent, and second one is called as what it is consequent, which I have told already in the ratio while teaching the topic. So every ratio has how many terms? 2 terms. First term is called as antecedent, second one is called as the consequent. This is the second ratio. Again in second ratio, this is called as the antecedent, this is called as the consequent, this is antecedent and this is the consequent. So to convert these 3 ratios into one single ratio, what you have to do? You have to multiply all antecedents on one side and consequents on another side, right? Take separate all antecedents on one side and consequents on another side. Like the antecedent of the first ratio is what it is 2, right? Is multiplied by antecedent of the second ratio is what it is 4 into antecedent of the third ratio is how much it is 5. So multiply all antecedents on one side, right? So we get what it is new antecedent. We get what it is new antecedent, and then you multiply consequents on another side. So my consequents are what? These are the consequents, right? So consequent of the first ratio is 3 into consequent of the second ratio is 6 and consequent of the third ratio is what it is 3, like this. So if you multiply all antecedents on one side and consequents on another side, so we get new ratio as antecedent is to consequent. So if you multiply this, so you get how much? 2 into 4, it is 8, 8 into 5, you get 40, right? Is to multiply this also, right? So 3 into 6, 18, 18 into 3, you get 54, like this. So my new ratio comes to what it is, 40 is to 54. So whatever ratio is obtained, this is called as it is compounded ratio, and this compounded ratio forms the first two terms of the proportion, because a proportion has how many terms? I said 4 terms. To put the proportion we require how many terms? 4 terms. So out of these 4 terms, this new ratio forms the first two terms of the proportion. First two terms are what it is, A is to B, and this will be asked, whatever the question in the exam, that will be the next two terms. So like this, whatever may be the number of ratios, so we can convert them in one single ratio. That ratio is called as the compounded ratio. Clear? So I hope this is clear to you all, right, about it is compounded proportion, right? So this is I have given the brief idea about what it is, the proportion. So in the next video, so I will come with the problems on what it is proportion. Thank you.